Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to this video. Today we're going to take a look at Django REST Framework. So this will be the first video in this Django REST Framework series. I plan to cover a bunch of different things about Django REST Framework, and we're going to build our own REST API using this Django REST Framework. So to get started, what is the Django REST Framework? Well, it is a way for us to build powerful web APIs. So this right here is the Django REST Framework homepage. I'll link the URL in the description. I recommend you go to it and check it out. So on here you'll find a bunch of different stuff. You have the homepage. See, there's a quick tutorial and there's an API guide, which has information on a bunch of the essential components for the REST framework. So if you follow along with this complete series, you're going to learn a bunch of different things. We're going to talk about serialization, how we can convert data from Python objects to JSON and back. We're going to look at requests and responses. We're going to look at how we can do class-based views. We're going to look at authentication, permissions, and OAuth. We're going to look at relationships and hyperlinks in the web view API, so you can easily navigate to different objects. We're going to look at view sets and routers. We're going to talk about some of the things in here, all while we learn how to use Django REST Framework to build a REST API for a blog. Before we start, I'd like to mention that all the code will be in this GitHub here. I'll link this in the description. So these first two commits right here are what we will be doing today. So definitely encourage you to go to this URL, download the code, clone it, or just use it for reference. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create our project folder. So I'm going to make a directory and I'm going to call this YouTube REST tutorial. Get CD into that and list everything out so there's nothing there yet. So first we need to make a virtual environment. So I'm going to make a Python 3 virtual environment with the following command. I'm going to call this env. And if we list everything out, we see that that was indeed created. Next, let's activate that virtual environment with source env/bin/activate. Okay, perfect. So because Django REST Framework is an extension of Django, we need to install Django first. So we'll say pip install Django. Okay, there we go. And next we will install the Django REST Framework. So that will be pip install Django REST Framework, all in one word. Alright, perfect. Now if we list that out, we still see nothing's there. So let's start our Django project. We'll say Django admin start project, and we'll call this tutorial. Now if we list it out, we see our project. Let's cd into that project, and at the manage.py level, we're going to use that to start our first app. So we're going to say python manage.py start app, and we're going to call this posts, because we will be, like I said, creating a REST API that allows us to store blog posts. Alright, perfect. Now I'm going to open this in a text editor. So I'm going to list out everything, move back a directory, and open this all up in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is add our posts app in our installed apps. So let's open up the tutorial folder. Let's open up tutorial, and let's open up settings.py. I'm going to remove all this, and down here for installed apps, we're going to add our app. So we'll say posts.apps.postsconfig. Perfect. Next, let's add the Django REST Framework. So this is added as an app. So we'll go down here, we'll say REST_framework. And that is all we need to do in here. So next we're going to create a model to store our data. So in the posts app, we're going to open up models.py, and this is where we will create our model. So the first thing that we're going to do is make a class, and we'll call this post. And this will be a model class, so models.model. So we're going to add a couple of fields in here. We're going to add a created field. This will be the created date for our blog post. That will be models.datetime field. And we want that to be added automatically. So we'll say auto now add is equal to true. Next, we want a title for our blog post. We'll say title equals models.char field. We'll give that a max length of 100, and we'll say blank is false. So every title needs to have something. Next, we need the content for the post, so we'll say content equals models.text field. And lastly, we need the author. So we'll say author, and that will be equal to a char field as well. So I'm going to copy and paste that there. Down here, we're going to have a class meta, and this will simply define the ordering. So we'll say ordering equals created. So we're going to order our blog posts by the created date. Now that we have our model here, we can open up our terminal and make sure we are in the manage.py level, and we can make our migration. So we can say Python manage.py make migrations, and we can say posts because that is the app name. Hit enter. There we go, created model post, and now we can migrate. So we'll say Python manage.py migrate. And there we go, that adds all the initial migrations as well as the post migrations. Okay, so next we're going to make a Serializer class. So what this will do is provide a way of serializing and deserializing our post instances as JSON representations. So when you send data and retrieve data, it can't be in a Python object. So we use the Serializer class to convert that into a format that you can send, such as JSON. So for this, we're going to create a file in our posts app, and we'll call this file serializer.py. Now inside of here, we're going to import a couple things. We're going to say from REST Framework import serializers. Serializers, make sure you spell that correct. And then we are going to import our post model. So we're going to say from posts.models import post. Now in here, we're going to define a post serializer class, similarly to how we did it in the model. So we're going to say class post serializer. And in here, just like we said, models.model, we can do the same thing for serializer. So we'll say serializers dot serializer with a capital S. So inside of here, we need to put all of these as well as an ID. So we'll do ID first. So we'll say ID equal to serializers dot, this will be an integer field, and read only will be true. So this will be added whenever we create a new post. So it'll be added automatically. Next, we want the title. This will be serializers dot char field. This will be required, so we'll say required equals to true. Allow blank is equal to false. And max length, we said 100. I'm going to copy this because this will be the same for our content and author. So we'll change this to content and change this. Oops. Okay. So content equals that, and then author equals the same thing. And here in content, we want this to be a text area so we can add more content than just a max length of 100. So we're going to go in here and we're going to say style equals base template, and then that will be equal to a text area.html. So that will give us a nice text area to add content. We'll see that later in this tutorial series. So after this, we need to now define a create and update method. So we can say def create, pass in self, and pass in validated data. And here, this will create and return a new post instance given that validated data. So we'll say return post.objects.create. We'll pass in that validated data. Next, we need the update method. So this will update and return an existing post instance, again given the validated data. So we'll say def update, pass in self, pass in the instance and the validated data. And then we need to go through each of these and get the validated data and set it as an instance. So we'll say instance.title equals validated data dot get. We'll get the title, and we'll say instance.title. We'll copy this, and and we will do the same for content and author. So we'll say instance.content equals validated data get content, instance.content, and author. All right, perfect. Now down here, we need to save that and then return the instance. So we can say instance.save, just like a Django form, and we will say return the instance. So just to recap, this first part of the post serializer class defines the fields that are getting serialized or deserialized, and then the create and update methods are defining how these instances are being created or modified when you call instance.save. In this flag up here, like I mentioned, when this is rendered to HTML, it will be displayed as a text area. Okay, so now that we created this, how do we use it? Well, we can do that in our terminal here. So what I'm going to say is python manage.py shell, and this will drop us into the Django shell, and we can run interactive commands in here. So let's make a couple of blog posts and save them using this serializer class. So first we need to import a couple things. We'll say from posts.models import post. We'll say from posts.serializers import post serializer. We'll say from REST framework dot renderers import JSON renderer. This will allow us to render the data as JSON. And then we also need to parse through that JSON data. So we can say from REST framework dot parsers import JSON parser. There we go. So now that we have all these imports, we can create a new post. So let's say post is equal to post model, and we can pass in all of our options here. So we can pass in a title, the content, and the author. So we'll say title equals first post. We'll say content equals this is the content, and we'll say author equals, and I'll set that to my name. So as you can see, as many fields as you have, you just set them like this. It's comma separated, and after we have that, if we hit enter, okay, no errors, that looks good, and we can save that by saying post dot save. Enter. Okay, perfect. So it looks like it was saved successfully, and we'll see that in a sec. Now, remember that these fields are required, so if I left any of them out, it would give me an error, so be careful of that. So let's do that one more time. We'll keep the author the same. This is the content also, and we'll rename the title of this to second post. Enter there, and let's save it. So now we have two post instances here. So let's serialize one of these instances. So we'll say serializer there we go, equals post serializer, pass in the post that we just created, and we'll say serializer.data, and that should give us some output. There we go. So here we just translated the model instance into Python native data types. So to finalize this serialization, we need to render this data into JSON. So we can do that by saying content equals JSON renderer dot render. We can pass in serializer dot data, and we hit enter. There we go, it worked. And we can see what that did by printing it out by saying, oops. And we can see that being printed by just typing content. There we go. Now it doesn't look too different than this above line, but you can notice that we now have double quotes as opposed to single quotes, and we have this B dash here. So this is now JSON. And deserialization is similar. So for that, we can import IO. We can say stream is equal to io.bytes.io. Oops, bytes IO, no dot. Passing content. And we'll set data equal to JSON parser dot parse, and pass in the stream. Okay, that worked. Now that parsed the stream into Python native data types, and we need to restore these data types now into a fully populated object instance. So for that, we can say serializer is equal to post serializer, pass in the data equals to data, and let's make sure that's valid. So we'll say serializer dot is valid. Hopefully this returns true. Okay, perfect. So the data is valid. If that returns false, then you did something wrong. So I recommend you go back and rewatch and try to figure out what that is. And then we can say serializer dot validated data to print that out so we can see what the data is. and then we can save that. So serializer.save. There we go. So it says post, we have a new post object with the ID. And we can also serialize query sets instead of model instances. To do this, all we have to do is add a many equals true flag to the arguments passed in with serializer. So we can say serializer equal to post serializer post.objects.all. We'll pass in many equals true. Now if we print out the data, serializer.data, we get all of the objects. So this is what we created first, and so the second one, you can see it with the IDs. Okay, so if we look back at our serializers class here, you see it's replicating a lot of information that's also contained in our snippet model. So luckily for us, Django has a built-in class to eliminate all of this unnecessary code. So we can use the model serializer class to do this. And again, relating it to forms, Django has the form class and the model form class, which is similar. So let's look at how we can refactor this serializer code here using the model serializer class. So we're going to come in here, and under here we're going to say class meta. We're going to say model equals post, so we need to specify where we're getting this data from, which is the post model here. And we can pass in the fields by saying fields equals, and this will be a Python list, so we'll say ID, we'll say title, we'll say content, and author. So these are just the fields right here. Now we can get rid of all this. So we replace those lines with this, which is a lot simpler. And lastly, we're not using serializer, we're using model serializer. So be sure to change this up here. Because we did this, one nice property that serializers have is that we can inspect all of the fields in a serializer instance, and we can print its representation. So let's go back to our Django shell. Let's quit and reopen because we made changes. Let's import our post serializer again. So we'll say from posts.serializers, I think that was right the first time, import post serializer, model. Make sure to spell that correct. Okay, let's quit. Oh, there we go. Change that. Okay, that works. And we'll say serializer is equal to post serializer, and we can print REPR, the representation of that. And here we'll pass in serializer. Now if we print that out, here we go. We see post serializer equals ID, title, content, author. And as you recall, this is what we had before we replaced this. So you can see this code here does the exact same thing and actually renders that. Okay, so next we're going to look at how we can write Django views using our serializer. So we can view this data in the browser.